March 30th, 1885. Russian and British forces stand mere miles apart in the deserts of Central Asia. The two greatest empires on Earth are hours away from a war that could reshape the world. But how did we get here? How did Russia, in less than a century, conquer 1.5 million square miles and 6 million people in a region most have never heard of? This is the story of Russia's forgotten imperial conquest. The year is 1717. Tsar Peter the Great has a problem. Russian merchants venturing into Central Asia are being robbed, kidnapped, enslaved. The culprits, the Khanate of Khiva, an ancient power controlling crucial trade routes deep in the desert. Peter decides to send a message. Several thousand Russian soldiers under Prince Alexander Bekovich Cherkassky march into Khivan territory. They crush the Khan's army in open battle. Victory seems certain. The Khivan Khan requests negotiations. Peace terms are discussed. Then he makes an offer. The exhausted Russian army can rest in several towns across his territory. Bekovich accepts. It's a trap. Once the Russian forces separate, the Khivans strike. Town by town, they massacre the divided Russians. Nearly every soldier is killed, including Bekovich himself. It's one of the most devastating betrayals in Russian military history. But Peter is fighting Sweden in Europe. Revenge will have to wait. And wait it does, for over a century. Russia doesn't forget about Central Asia, though. Through the 1700s, they gradually absorb the fragmented Kazakh tribes on their southern frontier. The junior and middle hordes accept Russian rule in the 1730s. It's a slow expansion, but by the 1830s, Russia is ready to move deeper. In 1839, Count Vasily Perovsky leads an expedition to finally punish Khiva. The planning takes years. They gather thousands of camels for the desert crossing. The route is mapped. Everything is prepared, except for one thing. Perovsky launches his invasion in October, marching into one of the worst winters in decades. Temperatures plummet. By February, 1 in 5 Russian soldiers is dead without the Khivans firing a single shot. The expedition collapses. Khiva remains unconquered. Russia is humiliated again. But everything is about to change. The 1850s bring new urgency. Russia establishes forts along the Syr-Darya River, pushing against the Khanate of Kokand. In 1853, they blast through the fortress at Akhmechet with explosives, securing their first real foothold. Then the Crimean War pulls their attention back to Europe. When Russia returns to Central Asia in the 1860s, the stakes are higher. Britain is expanding through Afghanistan, approaching Central Asia from the south. The American Civil War has strangled global cotton supplies. Central Asia has cotton, and Russia's frontier forts are proving impossible to supply without controlling more territory. The target, Tashkent, one of the wealthiest cities in Central Asia. General Mikhail Chernyayev attacks in winter 1864 and fails. He retreats, regroups, and returns in May 1865. This time he crushes the Kokand army outside the walls, killing their Khan. Russian troops breach the city. For 2 days they fight street by street. When the smoke clears, Tashkent is Russian. There's just one problem. The Tsar never authorized taking the city. Chernyayev seized it before new orders arrived, but St. Petersburg accepts the conquest. They call Chernyayev the Lion of Tashkent. They also never give him another command. Tashkent changes everything. Kokand is forced to surrender most of its territory. And now Bukhara knows they're next. The Bukharan armies march east in desperation, hoping to stop Russia before they grow stronger. At Jizak, they meet the Russian forces. It's a disaster. Their army collapses. Their modern artillery is captured. Russia takes key fortresses across the region. In 1868, the Russians march on Samarkand, one of the oldest cities in the world. After it falls, the Russian commander Konstantin Kaufmann, now governor-general of the entire conquered territory, pursues the retreating Bukharans with most of his army. He leaves just 700 men to hold Samarkand. Then 30,000 Bukharans, Kokandis, and allied fighters arrive to retake the city. 700 Russians against 30,000. Outnumbered more than 40 to 1. The defenders barricade themselves in the citadel. Artillery pounds their position, casualties mount. For a week, they hold. When Kaufmann hears about the siege, he rushes back. The besiegers scatter before he even arrives. Bukhara is broken. They become a Russian protectorate, paying tribute and granting trade rights. Now only Khiva remains independent, and Kaufmann remembers the history. He's not making the mistakes of 1717 or 1839. In 1873, he prepares 4 separate columns to attack from every direction: north, south, east, and west. They march in summer, not winter. They're well supplied and heavily armed. The Khivans don't even try to resist. Having watched Kokand and Bukhara fall, the Khan surrenders almost immediately. Russia takes the Khiva oasis without a major battle, but Russia wants blood. The Yomid Turkmen tribes had resisted sporadically during the invasion. Kaufmann decides to make an example. On July 7, 1873, the 8th Turkestan Company sweeps through Yomid villages for 3 weeks, killing indiscriminately. The massacre is so brutal that Kaufmann himself later omits it from his official reports. 2 years later, rebellion erupts in Kokand. Angry at Russian dominance, the Khan's own armies overthrow him. In January 1876, Kaufmann's forces arrive and annihilate the rebels at Andijan. This time, Russia doesn't bother with puppet rulers. Kokand is abolished, fully annexed into the Russian Empire. Only the Turkmen remain. Scattered across the Karakum Desert in what's now Turkmenistan, they have no unified government, no real army. Russia plans to sweep through and connect with Afghanistan's northern border, where British influence looms. In September 1879, Russian forces besiege the fortress of Gayoktepe, where Turkmen civilians and fighters have gathered. The Russians bombard the walls, then order an assault. It fails catastrophically. Hundreds of Russians are cut down. They're forced to retreat. 1 year later, a second Russian army arrives. They surround Gayoktepe and begin the siege again. This time, the walls fall. When Russian soldiers pour through the breach, they don't stop at military targets. 15,000 Turkmen soldiers and civilians are slaughtered. Central Asia is conquered. By 1884, Russia controls everything from the Kazakh steppe to the Afghan frontier. But that frontier isn't settled. Britain controls Afghanistan as a protectorate, and both empires claim the Panjshir region. Russian and Afghan troops build forts within miles of each other. Tensions simmer. March 30th, 1885. Russia attacks. Afghan forces are routed. Russia seizes Kushka and claims Panjshir. London erupts. St. Petersburg prepares for war. The British Empire and the Russian Empire stand on the brink. One wrong move, and the world sees a conflict unlike any before. Diplomacy saves the day. The Afghan emir convinces both sides to negotiate. Britain recognizes Russian control of Kushka. Russia agrees to respect Afghanistan's remaining borders. The crisis ends. Kushka becomes the southernmost point of the Russian Empire. The conquest of Central Asia is complete. From 1717 to 1885, Russia transformed a humiliating massacre into an empire stretching across Central Asia. Khiva, Kokand, and Bukhara, ancient powers, reduced to protectorates or absorbed entirely. The Kazakhs, Turkmen, and Uzbeks became subjects of the Tsar. This empire would last until 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed. Today, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan are independent nations, but the echoes of Russian conquest remain in their borders, their infrastructure, their politics. Central Asia's conquest is a forgotten chapter of imperial history, but it shaped the world we live in today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of empires, conquests, and the events that changed our world. What other forgotten chapters of history should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.